Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's event. I think we will have some fascinating conversations today. My name is Sue Mohapatra, and I am a current MBA student and also the president of the Haskayne MBA Society at the Haskayne School of Business. I will be your moderator today. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are bringing this conversation to you today from the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. The University of Alberta acknowledges that they are located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nation, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. I would like to welcome the deans of both the Haskayne School of Business and the Alberta School of Business. Jim Dewald is a former real estate developer turned professor, a longtime entrepreneur, and as we know, the current dean of the Haskayne School of Business, where he teaches in the strategy and global management area. But something that most of us perhaps would not know is he often wears non-traditional socks and binge watches British crime shows. Kyle Murray is the dean of the Alberta School of Business and an expert in human decision-making. His research focus is on innovation and behavior change challenges. He's also an expert in making cherry pies and is an avid science fiction reader. Welcome, Kyle and Jim.
Well, thanks so much, Sue.
Thank you, Sue. Great to be here. I have to say that cherry pie thing got me in a lot of trouble. Now everybody wants me to make them a pie, and my cherry tree is actually quite small, but story for another day.
Okay, so let's start with a poll question for our audience. How many graduates do you think there are from the two business schools combined? You should see the poll on your screen now, and I will give you a few moments to select your answer.
While we're waiting for that answer, if anyone hears like what sounds like a large gravel truck, I think just because we started this webinar, it pulled up beside my office and started dumping gravel or something like that. Hopefully it's muted out the back. It always happens.
All right, so hopefully everyone has answered. And the correct answer is 58,000, 28,000 from UCalgary and 30,000 from UFA. Wow, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I have some questions to begin our conversation today. And let's start with you first, Jim, and then we can take Kyle's perspectives on the same question. So what is the biggest challenge facing business schools in equipping our future leaders today?
Yeah, well, that is certainly the question of the hour, question of the day. Let me start, though, by thanking you, Sue, for taking this on and letting you know that we're so proud that you are one of our alumni, and both schools have such great MBA and BCom alum, and just really excited about this session.
Thank you so much.
We're entering a very exciting, rapidly changing, but hyper-competitive era. And this is all caused by new technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, blockchain, you know them all. And they've all come about, but now they're starting to weave more and more into our everyday lives, changing businesses. There's also the change in energy. Energy transition will grip Alberta, even though in the short term, it looks like our short-term challenge is going to be once again a boom, which will undoubtedly be followed by a bust. But over the longer term, energy transition will happen, decarbonization will happen. And all of these factors make business schools, business school research, and business school education very critical and at this particular time. I want to just focus on three particular things. And the first is, let's face it, Alberta is actually pretty small. It's around 4.3 million people, just over 10% of the nation's population. Yeah, we definitely punch above our weight, but we have to combine the strengths of the entire province. That's why I'm so excited to be here with Kyle, because the Alberta Business School and the Haskayne School of Business need to support one another and collaborate as our cities must work together to leverage our combined strengths in research, education, and community building. We actually have a great example of that, and we'll talk a little more about it later on in the session. But the Creative Destruction Lab, we're both very engaged in. And how successful is this program? In just the first 4 years, $1.3 billion in new venture value was created. And I'm just so pleased that we're able to work this together. The second point I want to make is that, yes, knowledge is power, and current knowledge is much more powerful. So it's imperative that both of our schools are able to give our graduates the right tools, which means we have to do cutting edge research, and we have to be technologically able, our students graduating, in using all those technologies I mentioned before, artificial intelligence, robotics, and such. And so that's really important. It's almost table stakes now, but we're taking it, both of our schools, to higher levels through data science, data analytics. And also we're marrying that up with strong knowledge in what does diversity, equity, and inclusion really mean, building the best skills in teams, emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, and so on. The third point I want to make is, rather than teaching students what to think, we're focusing on teaching students how to approach blind spots and the unexpected. Like I can't give you answers to solutions to problems that I don't even know what they are or when they'll exist. But what I can do, and what our school can do, is give you ways to engage and lead through uncertainty, whether it comes from climate crises or pandemics or social unrest. There will be things coming forward that we've never seen before. And how do we address these in an effective and productive way? These are the things that our school is very focused on. And I think it's really timely to get a business education and support a business school.
Those were some great points, Jim, and myself, having been enrolled in a serial program last fall, I can vouch for the program. It gives us experiential learning and a hands-on exposure, and it's very unique to UFA and UFC, I would say. So Kyle, if you could share your thoughts on what you think are some of the biggest challenges that business schools are facing today.
Thanks, Sue. And yeah, I'm like Jim, really happy to be here. I grew up in Alberta in the 80s and 90s. And so I was a kid playing hockey when we had the great Oilers team that had the great battle with the Flames teams that were also exceptionally good at the time. And, I think because of that, probably my whole generation grew up with this like rivalry between Calgary and Edmonton. And Jim was absolutely right. The future is not rivalry. It's all about us collaborating together, because we are relatively small. We have two powerhouse business schools that punch way above their weight on the world stage. We have all kinds of opportunity with a young, educated workforce, and kind of the ethos of Alberta of being entrepreneurial and hardworking and innovative. There's so much opportunity. So I'm really happy to be here and talking with Jim. And when we had breakfast and came up with this idea, I thought this was wonderful, and we'll have to do it more often. In terms of challenges for business schools, one of the ones we face is we're competing on a global stage. So we recently hired, I think, 5 faculty over the last few months, and they came from Brazil, China, India, Iran, and one from Alberta. But that kind of competition really means that we're not just, it's not about Calgary and Edmonton. It's about us versus schools in China and Europe and the United States and all over Canada. And so that kind of competition is a challenge for us, and it'll continue to be a challenge as we go forward. I think the other thing that we are, and you kind of touched on it, Sue, that's incredibly important, is we need to do more learning by doing. We had 100 years of what I kind of call chalk and talk, the lecture went from chalkboards to overheads when I was in university to PowerPoint. And we didn't change a whole lot. I mean, of course, there were some innovations along the way, but now we're going through massive change. And I think a big part of that push is towards that experiential and work integrated learning. And I know we have lots of other things to talk about today, so I could go on and on about this, but I think Jim hit a lot of the really key points, and I won't reiterate that as well.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you give students considering that we are in one of the biggest transitory phases ever with digital transformation touching all segments of businesses, and we see dramatic shifts in different industries, energy in particular? What advices would you give the students to cope with this change?
I'll jump in and I'll be quick. My advice usually is do stuff. When we talk to our panelists, we're going to talk to people who've done a lot of different stuff. You have all kinds of opportunity. I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know what your next job will be or what skills you'll need exactly. I know that you'll need some of the decision-making skills that we teach. I know you'll need some of the networks that you'll build when you're at our schools. But I think really the big thing is get out there and do some things, like have an impact, aim to have an impact. Especially early in your career, don't worry so much about your salary or, the size of your office, but worry about what you can do to have some impact. And I think if we do that, if our 58,000, 60,000 alumni engage in that, we're going to make a real difference in the world.
Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, great.
Yes, Jim, if you could, we have just 2 minutes to end this segment. I think advices from you for our students would be the perfect way to be closing this.
Well, fabulous points, Kyle. And I just want to, as an aside, say, this was Kyle's idea and a great idea for us to get together. And I do hope we do it much more. And I agree with everything Kyle said. Great advice for students and alumni overall. And I guess the other thing I'd say for, in particular, fresh graduates is don't worry about getting your perfect passion job. You might be very surprised to find different things give you different passions. So I totally agree with Kyle, roll your sleeves up, get fully involved, give everything that comes before you a full and honest effort, and you never know where it'll lead.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fair to say Jim and I never expected to be professors, and I definitely never expected to be a dean. But I think we really loved the journey, both of us, and our different kinds of career paths. So
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jim and Kyle. And it was short, but very insightful session. And I will over to you now, Jim, for the next segment.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Sue. And we'll see you a little later on. But in the interim, I want to, we'll see you after the next segment. We are now going to begin the second part of the event today. We have 2 alumni joining us, and it's my pleasure to introduce the first one to you. Jane Zhang is a co-founder and CEO of Etch Sourcing, a Canada-based consultancy specializing in providing strategy and execution services in the sourcing, procurement, and category management space. Jane has both a BCom and an MBA from the Haskayne School of Business. Jane, with a DBA, you could have a triple crown. Thank you for being with us today. And now, Kyle, would you like to introduce our second panelist?
yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jim, and welcome, Jane. I'm going to introduce Richard Jenkins, who is the chairman and managing director of Black Creek Investment Management, one of Canada's fastest growing investment management specialists. They have over $14 billion in assets. And Richard is a BCom from the Alberta School of Business. He's also a very valued member of our Business Advisory Council. And I'd just say welcome and thank you both for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thanks very much, Jim and Kyle. Thanks.
Let's jump right in. I think we have another poll question that we want to get up. Let's see if we can make that happen. Look at that. So how many tech companies are there in Alberta? Not always thought of as a tech company. I know Corey's probably angry at me for just even mentioning that, but we're not always thought of as a tech province, but how many do you think there are in Alberta? And as while we're waiting for that to pop back up, we might as well jump into our first question. And we can maybe start with Jane and then go to Richard. The first question is, what's the biggest challenge or opportunity facing businesses in Canada today?
Well, that's a very loaded question.
It's a tough question.
So,
Let's start with the tough one.
I think first and foremost, Jim, we'll have to talk about that Triple Crown. That sounds very interesting to me. I think one of the biggest challenges that we see right now for Canadian businesses is how are we going to really, drive the industry forward. So for us, our business specifically focuses on procurement. So in the course of the last 2 years, with the COVID pandemic, we have seen procurement and supply chain challenges really spotlighted in so many different ways across the world globally. And in a lot of ways within Canada, we've seen that struggle where so many of our industries actually are reliant on external and foreign supply. So predominantly out of China, out of manufacturing. And whenever you have your supply routes disrupted, you don't have as strong of a local domestic base that you can build off of. So you've seen a lot of companies start to retool throughout the pandemic to be able to satisfy a lot of demand. So I think one of the biggest shifts and one of the biggest pushes for Canada as a whole within the business sector is how are we going to collaborate within Canada to make Canada as a whole stronger and stronger so that all of the different business sectors that operate, we do become that collaborative business sector, and we can have that collaboration between all the different business units.
Thanks, Jane. Just before I throw it to Richard, if you saw the poll results pop up, the correct answer is actually over 3,000, and that number is growing very rapidly in Alberta. So over to you, Richard, same question. What are the big challenges in Canada for business today?
It may surprise you, but I don't think the challenges have changed all that much, at least over my career. To some degree, every business challenge is about better, faster, or cheaper. And what's changed is the context. So today we're much more global. If you just look at the makeup of your classrooms, it's incredible how global the people are. But I would say the context has changed. So much more digitization using tools. Secondly, the human component in business, I think, has actually been lifted up and accentuated higher. So Jim alluded to some of the skills, Kyle, you alluded to some of them. And then, so the integration to me of digital tools with human beings, however you want to think about that, industry by industry, is the forward challenge, but it's always in that context of that better products, faster or cheaper. So that's how I see it. It's the same, but different.
That's great. I'll throw it over to Jim to ask the next question, but I'm glad neither of you led with Zuckerberg's vision of the metaverse. So we don't have to discuss that right now.
Well, if somebody could explain it to us, maybe we would have had that discussion.
Maybe in the next section.
So I'll start with Richard, and I want to give a little bit of context because there's lots of competing factors here. So we look at the Canadian economy, and inflation is up, interest rates are going to go up, energy prices are going to go up. And then you look at jobs, and those factors certainly would lead towards thinking there's lots of great jobs. But then we have technology and transformation and lots of disruption going on. What keeps you up at night when you think about all these things?
Well, aside from the fact that I invest money all over the world, which means I'm up all night all the time anyways, it's more, I think to some degree, those things are all real, and they're policy choices, and they're going to affect our lives. But these things I find over time don't matter as much as the quality of management, the decisions that people make in businesses. And so we often are awake at night thinking, do I have the right people? Have I backed the right people? Because at the end of the day, Edmonton, Calgary, oil prices go up, they go down. This energy transition is going to happen for sure. I've seen interest rates at 14%. I've seen the negative 1%. We've seen all of these things. The successful companies have good management teams that can work their way through all these things and come out further and further ahead. I don't want to overemphasize, but it's about solving problems, making things better, faster, cheaper. I just keep coming back to that over and over again. So we stay awake at night for everything, but at the end of the day, focusing on, do you have the right management, the right people? And if you think about, that's what you're building, the management teams of the future. That's why business education, I believe, is so incredibly important.
Excellent. Is there anything that gives you comfort that you can go to sleep?
This is going to sound very strange, but I get comfort from thinking about how difficult my grandparents had life, emigrating from war-torn areas of Europe to build farms in minus 40 degrees, you know, in sod houses in Alberta and having a wonderful life, even though they've had life really, really difficult. You know, when you think about those things, world wars, pandemics, etc., our challenges today are actually relatively minor and they're luxury challenges. So,
Wow, gee, thanks for,
yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. And if you ever get tired of minus 40, we're not supposed to be competitive, but you can always move down south to Calgary. Jane, what are your thoughts about what keeps you up at night at the economy and the job situation?
I think for us, it's, do we have the right mission in terms of where we're going as an organization? I mean, we started 5 years ago. So our business was started between myself and my co-founder 5 years ago, and we've grown and more than doubled every single year after that. So part of that growth is really, and not just part, a very, very large chunk of that growth is contributed entirely to the amazing, amazing people that we have on our team. And people join organizations, I feel like, for many, many different reasons. But one of the biggest reasons that people should be joining organizations is a shared foundational value set in terms of like where this organization is going. Does this organization share what you value and what you want to be a part of? Because that's a lot of your time per day that you're contributing, that you're dedicating to an organization. And so you should have a shared value set that aligns with that organization. And so for us, we really want to be at the pinnacle of driving a lot of the sustainability movements in Canada, of driving a lot of the evolution of procurement really to a more strategic function within organizations and being at the forefront of those transformations. So having that question on our mind always is, are we truly setting the right mission? Are we truly aligning that mission with all of our people so that everyone feels like we're on that journey together and it's a shared journey and it's a shared trip? Is one of the biggest things that keeps us up, I guess, at night. Although I sleep pretty well. I will say, full disclosure, I do sleep pretty well.
Thanks, Jane. That's and congratulations on your tremendous success with your firm. Over to you, Kyle.
Great, thanks. We want to get to questions from the audience in a minute. I'd say, Richard, I didn't realize that that's the way you frame things. I often frame it for myself the same way. If I'm having a bad day or a bad week, or I feel like I'm a little overwhelmed, I think about, my grandfather who in Saskatchewan would have been in the middle of a depression, shoveling gravel from a truck and trying to make a living that way. And I feel like I'm pretty soft and I have it pretty easy even on my worst days. So with a couple minutes left, let me throw a somewhat self-serving elevator pitch request to you, which is a quick answer on what's the value of business education. Maybe I'll start with Jane and then go to Richard.
Well, I went back twice and I'm contemplating a triple crown right now. So I'd say it's pretty valuable. No, I think one of the biggest things when it comes to business education, and actually I think all forms of education, but specifically, and I can only speak to the Haskayne program, and I say Jim has not paid me to say this, but at very minimum, the business program, the business education really teaches a way of thinking. And I think that's more important than learning any fundamental formula or any fundamental, Excel spreadsheet or way of calculation, but really a way of thinking, a way of approaching problems. I think that is the biggest value of a business education. It gives you a safe environment in which you can really train your brain to start to think about solving problems. Because to Richard's point, once you're in the real world, once you're in corporate, all anybody cares about is, can you solve my problem? How fast can you solve my problem? And how cheap can you solve my problem? And if you train your mind to be able to think about problems that when you encounter them, you can really approach them with the right mindset, how to think about them strategically, how to think out of the box, how to bring in the right elements, bring in the right people, pull the right conversation, pull the right data together. I think that is the most fundamentally important thing of business education.
Thanks, Jane. Great answer. And Richard, what do you think?
Well, like Jane, I had to do it twice as well. Maybe I didn't learn too well the first time, but I do think it's absolutely right. Jane hit the nail on the head, and Jim talked a little bit about it. I think it was really valid that some of this is table stakes. You need to have some of those basic skills whether it's accounting, finance, marketing, etc., to put things in context, to figure out in your own mind what the right thing to do is. I wished I would have paid more attention to people skills. It wasn't hugely emphasized back when I went to school, which was a long time ago. And I spend the majority of my time running a people organization on the people skill side. So I would tell everybody today who's going through it for the first or second time to pay more attention to those people skills, because they're going to be so important. The technical things come and go. They are table stakes, but they just keep moving along. But the people skills, how to solve a problem, how to frame it. Leadership, I'm not sure if you can really teach it. There'll be some debate, I'm sure, about that. But certainly the aspects of framing it and what's the right thing to do and where do you go, it was really, really critical. And I learned that at business school. I came from a family where nobody was in business. So I would never have been able to do it without that help.
Fantastic. Okay, I see Sue's popped back up on our screen. I know we want to go to some audience questions. So over to you, Sue.
Yeah, thank you for this insightful discussion. We have some very interesting questions and also perspectives in the Q&A. So one of our alumni says, Alberta is indeed punching above its weight, but collaboration across jurisdictions and sectors is critical, like we discussed. And he asks, how do we better engage our alumni and students to be best positioned for the global competitive markets?
Just crickets from Jim and I as we wait for the other person to jump in.
Do you want to address these, Sue, to Kyle and I, or to the panelists, or you pick? Unless you're ready to go, Kyle.
I think I would expect Jim and Kyle to answer this, and I leave it up to you both, maybe both of you.
Well, I'll be quick and then I'll let Jim jump in. I think one of the things that's most important, I'm a marketing professor, so I tend to think in terms of relevance. If we can be relevant to our alumni, if we can bring things to them that are of value, that have an impact on their careers and their lives, then I think we can be more engaging. And that's a never-ending journey. It's like customer service. We can always be better at that. And that's what we're striving to do.
Yeah, that's a great response. We do have a formal mentorship program for our students, but I think, just overall engagement, it's got to happen on multiple levels, and it's got to be much broader than just within our city or within our province. So I think as much as possible, we can stretch out globally, and having students, I know both of our schools have very active exchange programs, and make sure that we can build the connections right across the globe for our students and our alumni. That's really important.
I'll add my vote to the exchange programs. They're fantastic. You get such an amazing experience just seeing how business is done in different countries. It really does build a lot.
The next question is specifically addressed for Richard. And the question is, he said that he is keen on backing the right people. How does he know they are the right people? Is their values, their track records?
Well, actually, I'm going to get out of this the easy way. Jane talked about some of the more important things. Are they setting the right goals? Are they creating the right culture? Are they attracting the right people? And therefore, the results follow those sorts of things. Of course, all the skills we learn about, the capital that's employed in a business, customer loyalty, the financial metrics that I'm very much trained in, but those follow the first part. What's the service or product that we're delivering? Are we headed in the right direction? Do we have the right people on the bus, so to speak, to deliver that? And then all those things follow. So those are the things we, as a financial investor, track very much. We look at turnover, employee loyalty. I mean, you see all the new statistics today, things like Glassdoor, et cetera. These didn't exist when I started. You couldn't track any of those, but you now can, right? To see whether or not the culture of the organization is the right one.
Thank you, Richard. The next question is specifically addressed for Jane. And one of our students says, congratulations on the success of edge sourcing. And can you please share your experience and motivation of your journey from business school to being a co-founder?
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, so first I did some work. So first I had to get some work. I didn't just graduate business school and go directly into starting a business. I actually spent a lot of time in industry, and that's actually where I met my co-founder. But business school, I mean, it was an awesome area to really build my business acumen at the same time as building my work experience acumen. I actually did my MBA in the evening, so I did both programs part-time, and it was a fantastic way to really make the most of every moment, right? I mean, we each only have 24 hours in the day. How do you spend that 24 hours? I mean, we try to sleep a little bit, Richard, but how do we spend that 24 hours, and how do we really maximize the amount of experience that we can build? And that was something that was really important to me. And so in building my work experience and my MBA at the same time, I was actually really able to gain all of that work experience in parallel. And that really led to starting the business and starting Etch. And what we really wanted to do with Etch was really disrupt a lot of the problems that we were seeing in the industry for consulting and in the industry for procurement. So we started with that intention, and I think we're still continuing down that journey.
That's very inspiring, Jane. Thank you. The next question is very relevant. It is pertaining to the COVID and pandemic times. So the students, particularly who have enrolled during the pandemic times, they perhaps have more learning adaptability challenges than others. And how are the schools planning to help this cohort specifically? And the person asking also is asking about the collaborative opportunities between Haskayne and UFA to helping these business students interact.
Well, maybe I'll start off here. I think there's advantages and disadvantages to being a COVID high school student. Firstly, I want to acknowledge, like they've missed out a lot in terms of graduations and in terms of a very special period of time in their life. And that's truly unfortunate. At the same time, they've learned skills, and they've had to learn under conditions that will make them stronger, will give them unique capabilities going forward that actually could very quickly become an advantage for them, from my perspective. I think it's a lot about what attitude they bring and how they view their skills and what they can bring to the table. Kyle, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's been a very personal experience for me. I had my oldest daughter was in grade 12 when it started. And so she had her graduation canceled and kind of has gone on to university, to online learning, offline, back in the class. And my youngest daughter is in grade 12 right now. So she missed a year and a half of her high school experience. Yeah, it's very difficult. Nobody would wish that on a cohort of students. But I think Jim's right. I think there's a lot of learning that happens very intensely because you're going through these sorts of challenges that, I never had to go through, and many others haven't seen anything similar in a long time. And then when you get to the business school, hopefully we'll be able to give you a really fantastic in-person experience that'll really, contrast wonderfully with those challenges in high school. I think part of the question was also about collaboration between the two schools. Jim and I get along really well. I see a lot of opportunity in the future for us to build on the relationship between the two schools.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, Jane, would an exchange trip to Edmonton be the same as Spain, or?
I have gone to Edmonton for the ice castles, Jim. I'm not no shade to Edmonton from me.
Wondering if I could just interject a little bit, Sue. It's hard when you have an old gray-haired guy make a comment, but to some degree, put it in context. Yes, it's been terrible, but people have learned the new skills, like Jim said, digital skills. They've learned how to switch between environments, and that's wonderful. And to some degree, the job marketplace and the opportunities today, they could be a whole heck of a lot worse. I mean, Kyle mentioned the 1980s. I graduated in the 80s. You had almost 40% unemployment amongst university graduates, and getting a summer job when you were in school was almost impossible. And those are all the building stones as a business person. You get a summer job, then you get a different one, you learn. Well, those opportunities do exist today. And to some degree, because of COVID, they're actually more. right? There are more opportunities than there were 20 or 30 years ago. So it's not all doom and gloom. I'm trying to, pump people up. It's terrible. I mean, I've got a daughter at university, and she moans about it, how terrible it is that she can't go to her classes. And then when her classes open up, she moans how hard it is. And I just say, grow up, right? But that's a terrible thing to say as a parent. But it's like, look, things are difficult. We understand, but there are other really positives, as both Jim and Kyle mentioned. The Alberta economy has really turned quickly. It's an entrepreneurial place. I mean, this energy transition, if I was to make a bet on who's going to make it faster than other places, it's going to be the businesses in Alberta. While the other guys are still talking about solar and wind, you guys just done it, right? I mean, I live far away and look back and say, wow, other jurisdictions are still trying to figure out what the rules are. You guys have, it's just going up before our eyes. So it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, there's a lot of real positives for young people, aside from being, having to be in their parents' homes for too long. But anyhow.
Thank you so much, Richard. We just have 1 minute left in Q&A, and most of the questions are on collaboration and how business schools can promote innovation. And I believe through our discussion, we have already touched upon those issues. The last question we can take, which is, why don't business schools offer courses on communication and people skills? Because the challenge is how best can we communicate the essence of our expertise in a manner that is received in a valuable way?
Yeah.
Well, I would say we do, but apparently we don't market them well enough, or they're not well enough known. But yeah, absolutely. We have multiple courses that are business school specific in communications and people skills for students. Although often people trying to follow in Richard's footsteps in finance try to avoid those courses, and we try to nudge them back into them and point to people like Richard who say it's actually a very important skill.
Totally agree. And we try to infuse it through all of our courses. So, there's actually 4 key skills that most top employers are looking for. One is problem solving skills. 2 is ability to work in a team. 3 is communication skills. And so we actually teach teams. All of our courses have team projects and have the need for a presentation. So communication is built right into it. And the 4th is really taking initiative and making things happen. So if you could do those things, and as Richard has said, you've got those basic skills that you've learned, you can take on the world. That's what we believe.
Thank you so much, all the panelists. And Jim and Kyle, as you mentioned, being in the MBA program, I can say that communication is at the forefront of the focus areas across all our courses that we take. So yes, we do have courses on communication and developing soft or personal skills. With this, we end the Q&A segment, and over to you now, Jim and Kyle, for the next segment, which is innovation in practice.
Okay, well, let me first say thank you very much to Richard and Jane. I wish we had more time with you. Fascinating insights. But we're moving at the speed of, I guess, these online panels now, and jumping over to our innovation section, which a lot of the questions were about, and we're going to dive into that in a little more detail. So let me start by introducing Corey Jansen. Corey is the co-founder and co-CEO of Alta ML, a Canadian artificial intelligence scale-up focused on building a portfolio of industry-specific AI software companies. Corey has a BCom from the Alberta School of Business. And in fact, I won't go into the whole history, but I taught Corey a course at one point that every time I talk to him, he tells me he can't really remember. So we'll get into that some other time though. Over to you, Jim.
I think that says more about Corey and how he likes to put people in his place. And
no, it was more like everybody's got like multiple degrees. I barely finished my BCom. I was on like the 5-year program because I was working, starting my business, right? So it wasn't about. I unfortunately, if I knew you were going to be dean one day, I would have shown up, I think.
There's a good lesson right there. You never know who's going to be important in the future. Well, thanks, Kyle, and welcome, Corey. I'd like to introduce Rahim Nathu, the Vice President of Business Development for Fluid Biomed, a med tech startup committed to the development of radical new bioabsorbable stent in the race to cure brain aneurysms. This is very high tech, very medical, really cool stuff. Rahim has a BCom from the Haskayne School of Business, and I believe you're also a graduate from the Creative Destruction Lab. Is that right, Raheem?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, that is correct. Undergrad here and also CDL many years after, and it was a great experience.
Excellent. Well, we've got a bit of a pattern going here, so I think we are going to start with a poll question for the audience. Okay, the Alberta Business School and Haskayne collaborate on the Creative Destruction Lab Rockies. What is the equity value of companies that have gone through the lab in the first 5 years? Really embarrassing if you don't get this one right, because I actually gave the answer in my introductory comments. But what do you think, Kyle? Do you think half the people will get it right? Or?
Good say, Jim. You're going to make me feel better about my comments with Corey. We'll see how many people pay attention when we speak.
Oh, they were listening.
Not bad, not bad.
2/3.
2/3. Let's just say the vast majority.
Well, let's start with that really tricky question that trips people up. And I'm going to start with Raheem. What's the biggest challenge or opportunity facing business in Canada today?
Great question. I think it's very all-encompassing, really, to be honest. I think one is talent. We need to build that talent up organically, but in the short term, we need to bridge the gap as well. So I think that's one. And I think the other, why are we having this forum, really? And it's to create more exposure to our business schools. We do a great job of instruction. And, I remember back in my day when we were at the U of C and our curriculum was all based off of the Harvard Business School. So what I'm really trying to get at is I think we need to do a better job of marketing, not only at the educational and institutional level. We need to do a better perspective from, as a company perspective. And we really need to build out the ecosystem of this collaboration between academia and commercialization. We need to do a better job of that. And why do I say that? Is because, and it leads to the real big, the big problem or the big challenge is capital, right? We have great ideas. We have great people that want to learn and expand their horizons and learn more, but we don't have the capital to compete per se. And we do a great job of being very capital efficient. So I think that all leads into that. And, that's why I'm a big advocate of building up our ecosystem and attracting more capital.
Great answer. Thanks, Raheem. How about you, Corey? What are the big challenges and opportunities?
That maybe 3 things: talent, talent, talent. It's nothing else matters from our vantage point. And I see it with other scale-ups who we talk with that share the same. I'm on the board of a couple of public companies. And it's the same thing in those board meetings. And then when we deal with our enterprise clients that we partner with, it's all everybody is talking about is how do we get the right people? And I think it's the opportunity there. And I think the business schools are primed to be those connectors, those translators when we talk about digital transformation, when we talk about innovation. If you're looking at our business, the AI business, there's a lot of marketing buzzwords and there's all this BS that kind of goes around. At the end of the day, all you're doing is you're optimizing business processes. Seems really sexy until you actually break it down. But I mean, it really isn't. But that means you need to understand those business processes. And you need to be able to be that connector, that translator between the executive and the data science team. There's roles that I don't think the average student even fully understands are needed in the marketplace. And so the opportunity is for us to really fast track into that space. If you have a BCom or an MBA that can understand the language of machine learning, that person puts themselves in a really interesting position where, as a product manager, whether it's in sales whether it's starting your own business or if you're on that path to being a CFO, there's so much opportunity if you can bridge that gap, because most often that communication doesn't exist when you're from, I don't want to be too stereotypical, but the hard sciences and the engineering, they're not exactly known for being the best communicators. So unless you bring those things together, you can't get it done. And right now there's just so much opportunity. But half the time I think it's changing the mindset to even realize that it's there.
I like that a lot, Corey. I know Jim probably gets this question. I get the question. We talk about our data analytics programs and students, and people say, well, but isn't the computing science department going to put out better programmers? And
I wish it would be a requirement. You know what? Like, I wish I said this to Joe, the Dean Doucette, the predecessor before Kyle took over. I said, what if in Alberta we made a mark and said everybody who comes through actually has to have this piece, right? And I mean, this is the naive guy who's not the academic who's coming in, right? Because we can be the uniter. Because you talk about having to get capital, right? You talk about all these other pieces of it. None of it comes together unless you can put together those teams, unless you can get the capital, unless you can actually translate business value, right? So I would love it, right? I mean, if every student had to do a co-op, and we all were doing, deep in terms of data analytics and AI, right? I think Alberta could really make a mark.
Yeah, I agree. I know Jim agrees. I can see him nodding his head. We're both going in that direction. And I think you're right. That translation piece is really the sweet spot for business schools, because we don't produce statisticians or computing scientists, but we do produce people who are familiar with data analytics and can help with translation. And I know both Calgary and Alberta have a fairly heavy stats component. Sometimes that slows students down to a 5-year program, Corey, but it is required in many cases to get through those courses. So let me ask you the question from the other side, because the other thing that we often get is why should students want to work in your industry? So what is it that you're excited about that students could also get excited about?
Because it's the most impactful technology that's going to change every single industry. Over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll build the tools that will transform literally every industry. And it doesn't matter whether it's ag or energy or health. This is as big as it was from the onset of the internet. Like right now, it's like the equivalent of being in, say, like 97, 98, 99, right? So I built my first company during that time. Again, started in second year at the School of Business. It feels eerily the same. And so there is no industry that allows you to work on more important, more purposeful problems, whether that's reducing GHG emissions, whether that's, looking at how we make a dent in cancer or other areas of health. Data, Mark Andreessen, the famous VC, talked about, software eating the world. Well, now it's data's eating the world, right? And we're not going to talk about AI software in a few years. We're just going to talk about software. And well, of course, like our kids are going to look at us and go, what? You use software that was rules-based, that wasn't driven by data, like back in the Stone Ages. It'll be talking about like punch cards, right? So it doesn't matter, because AI is not an industry, right? If you want to be in health, the most interesting area is the intersection of data and health tech, right? If you want to work in energy, the only way we're going to meet the Paris numbers are if you use software to actually optimize, industrial operations. And all that should be built in Alberta. We need to stop just exporting our resources, which we're damn good at, but we need to start putting that together, digitizing it, and exporting that brain power all around the world. That's how we create new billion-dollar industries. That's how we have rejuvenated downtowns. That's how we create wealth for our children and opportunity, right? And that's what we're going to do. That's what we are doing. But sometimes we get so caught up in all the negativity and all that, right? We kind of forget like what's right out in front of us.
I'd add that's also why we have panels like this, so you can tell that story. Raheem, what would you add?
And I'll just add one thing about going back to this cooperative education. I think when I was doing my undergrad, I think it was the first year that cooperative education was applicable to the business school. And what I took from that was tremendous value in getting exposure to both the private and public sector. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there. But to what Corey was saying about AI, and what it means to students and what kind of impact it may have. I kind of take it a step further from in terms of what we're doing. And I tell all our young people that have joined us, I said, you're in the best position that you're going to possibly be in, because you're working at a startup that has great founders with great reach. We're working on a technology that is disruptive, and the learning amount of learnings that you're going to get from this type of experience, you might not get later on in your career, right? So, use what you're learning now and focusing on that, because, and this is another thing I would say is what I learned from my experience in business school is the biggest skill I inherited was the skill of adaptability, right? And this is something that I tell these new grads and the people that are new to the workplace is that, look, be one of getting better, be building your skill set to become adaptable no matter what the situation. Look, we've just gone through a pandemic, and that kind of skill is so relevant nowadays. And I go back and look at my career and my path, and I look at it. Because of that adaptability, I've been able to wear many different types of hats, whether it is an employee, an executive, an investor, this is all, or being a life sciences ecosystem builder, right? So I think that's what I tell our young people is the ability to adapt, and then what that allows you to is just wear many different hats, and it just builds up and you evolve with those different hats.
That's great, Raheem. That kind of brings us back to where Jim and I started, which is things are changing very quickly, and the ability to adapt is so important. I see Sue again, which means it's question and answer time. So I'll throw it back over to Sue and we'll see what the audience has to say.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Raheem, for the advice on adaptability. And the first question of this segment is for you. One of our alumni is asking, is there an opportunity for the business faculties, companies like yours, and industry associations like BioAlberta to connect on projects and mentorship for students?
Yeah, great question. And Fluid Biomed is a member of BioAlberta. We've actually posted jobs through their new developments, new platforms, and so there is already a connection there. And this goes back to just making sure that everyone is doing their part in building up this collaborative ecosystem. And so, yeah, we work with BioAlberta, we work with the University of Calgary, and we really are trying to build bridges here. And so, yes, there is lots of opportunities, but we can still do a lot more.
Thank you so much. The next question is, how do we break down silos of academic specialty, referring to technical specializations, and promote creativity, communication, and development? And would this make us more relevant and less stodgy?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll jump in there, although I'm not sure if we're stodgy, but we'll always work hard to be less stodgy. You know what, there is actually a big conversation going on at the Haskayne School right now about specializations, concentrations, and it is noise. It's just pure noise, I think. The fact of the matter is that students need to take courses that interest them. We infuse across all of our courses, communication, how to think, those kind of skills. And then you can have your own mix of how much data analytics you want to take, how much leadership you want to take. And I think that is very much the wave of the future. And it ties right into both Raheem's comment about being adaptable and Corey's comment about the business people are the translators. There's lots of complex stuff going around, and you need people who can connect it all together. And so I think that's a real advantage of a business degree.
Yeah, and Jimmy, we got to emphasize CDL here again, right? CDL is something that you can be involved in across. It's not just CDL. It is in Calgary, but it's CDL Rockies by design. I've been an associate for the last 3 years. Nowhere else do you see the intersection of business and technology or hardcore science than that, right? And so I would even build on that and say the best thing for those who are students that are out there listening, it's not just about the classes, right? Like you can break down the silos yourself by through the student clubs or other things involved on campus. I mean, I did meet my first business partner through business school, right? So like the reason you come, yeah, it's to think 100%. I love, it's how to think, not what to think. But it's the people, right? I also met the person that I married, right? Who I also started a company with during business school. I met her in a student club. There's this club called ISIC at the U of A. And it's like a student exchange group, right? So it doesn't matter whether and again, I'm not as familiar with the Haskayne clubs, but like Rocky Mountain Business Seminar is awesome. The case, like we specifically target all the case competitions right now because those are the students that actually can work on a team. They work across it, and they just break down silos naturally. And like you don't realize it when you're in school, but it doesn't matter if you fail while you're doing it. Like you can be the executive for an organization like ISEC, and it doesn't matter. You actually get to go learn by doing, right? And then the next year, another exec is going to come in, they're going to reinvent the wheel, but that's the point. That's the beauty of it, right? And so like you get to do all these things almost like a free pass on, not messing up in the real world.
And that's not accidental, right? We design these things exactly that way. So you can fail fairly safely and learn from that failure. And I'd add in terms of collaboration, it's not just breaking down silos in business schools. Yeah, one of the great things about Haskayne and the Alberta School is we're great business schools that are part of great universities. We have silos to break down across the whole university. So it's not just accounting and finance and marketing, but it's engineering and it's humanities and drama and life sciences, and it just the whole gamut. There's so much opportunity. It's a big challenge for sure to provide a degree that teaches you something and also gives you that kind of breadth. But that's where we're headed, and that's where business schools are headed.
I'll just say, Sue, don't listen to Corey. I don't want you to fail as president of the MBA Association.
Corey's just talking about his experience and how well it worked out for him.
So Corey, the next question actually is for you. One of our alum is asking, is there a local industry association that shares latest industry trends and provides mentoring to AI-enabled startups?
That's good. Like there's a bunch of meetups that, I'm hoping getting back. I know we run we're involved in both cities. So if you just go to meetup.com and you just search for like AI meetups in each city, so they're not associations so much as like, I think at the start of the pandemic, we were trying to, virtually, and then no one wants to do it like that anymore. Right. And so I think they'll get back on track, but there's really strong ones in both cities. And it's a pretty tight knit group. It's not hard to get involved in it. And if someone's looking to get involved in it, just ping me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to kind of connect them if they give me a few more specifics about what they want. And I guess I would double down on it. There's a bunch of comments on the alumni. I do think we should probably lean into the alumni network more. I think that's probably an opportunity for improvement that we have. But I'll tell you what, if you just ask, that's how you actually, put it out there in the universe that you're looking for something else, right? You'd be shocked how often alumni are willing to help out if you just, reasonably and politely just like, hey, you know what, I'm looking for this. It doesn't necessarily have to always be a job or anything like that. And I think there's more we can do informally there for sure as well.
It's a secret too many people learn when they're out in business that everybody likes to talk to students. If you say I'm a student from the Haskayne School, that'll open all the doors you need. You'll find it's so much harder when you're out and you're a business analyst and to get that same, but people love talking to students, partly because students are so interesting. We have fantastic students.
Well said, Kyle. And one of our international students is asking, what are the biggest challenges for students with international experiences in tapping on the opportunities in Alberta with respect to the innovation trends? And this could be taken by any of you.
It is tougher in some businesses. It's a lot tougher for international students to get work. And so what we've done, and I know Kyle is as well, is have several internship programs and co-op programs to help get that introduction. I guess what I'd say though, to anybody who's out here who has job opportunities, please be very open-minded, and we have fantastic international students, and they'll do great work for you.
Yeah, it's a tough question for me to answer because we have more international students we hire than natural born Canadians. And for us, it's always, they're new Canadians on the path. And we've actually, spent money. And one of the benefits is like, helping fund legal advice and all the rest of it for those to become Canadians. And there's actually something called the Alberta Immigration Non-Migrant Program, which a number of us in the tech ecosystem were lobbying for, that fast tracks this to allow you to stay. So if you've come to Alberta and you're here internationally, just know we want you to stay. We want you to get your first job here. It kind of ties that last comment, like, start building your network, start reaching out, use the School of Business, use Haskayne as that calling card, right? Because we want you to stay here and become Canadians.
And can I just add one more thing real quick? I will just say, I'll throw the carrot in front of everyone with these international students, is that if you look at Fluid Biomed, our founders are both of diversity, and so is the executive team right now too. So there's a lot of, we're moving in the right direction. And I think that's what was instilled in us in business school, right? Is to embrace diversity and change and move forward.
Thank you so much, Rahim and Corey, and all our panelists. That was a very hopeful note to end the conversation with. And it was a very intriguing discussion. Thank you so much, Jim and Kyle, for your role in this event. And thank you everyone for attending and posing some interesting questions and perspectives. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks, everyone.